Formula Access, welcome. Today we bring you a very, very special guest. We have had the pleasure of working with Ferrari and Shell, and they have been just absolutely supportive of everything, and they're bringing us some incredible guests from this particular partnership, which has a long history, many, many wins, many, many big names, many, many great stories. Today, we bring you Marc Gené. Marc Gené, welcome and thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome, Ryan.
I was a little floored when they mentioned your name. I've been a fan for 20 some odd years. I know your name. I don't know you personally, but when our contact had mentioned your name and was like, would you be interested in him coming on the show? I was kind of like, yeah, yes, please make this happen. And he's like, oh, I got it. We're good friends. And so just to let the audience know, you're one of those guests that have a plethora of stories, and frankly, it's one of my favorite types of guests because I like stories of adversity. I like stories of time. I like actual stories. Younger guests don't generally have all of that life experience to talk about, and I think as a fan, just getting to hear that, Marc Gené is a human just like us and just a different type of world. It really allows everyone to connect with you. So I'm really, really excited to have you on the show, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So just to kind of let the audience know, like, who are you and what are you doing today?
Okay, so today my official role is Scuderia Ferrari's ambassador, which covers different jobs I do at Ferrari, because Ferrari at the end of the day is the one company that was born as a racing team before even they created the racing car company, which means there's a lot of activities with the racing DNA. For example, I take care of first of all, I travel with the Formula One team, so helping the drivers, Leclerc and Sainz in any way it can go, from media activities, which I may do so that they can focus more on their racing activities. It may mean that sometimes I also look at the videos, and if I can somehow help them in any way, regarding performance, I will do that because of my past Formula One experience as a driver. Then I do also TV commentary for the Italian TV. And then at Ferrari, I do other jobs. One in particular very interesting, which is taking care of all the Formula Ones that have been sold through the years to the most important clients we have in the world. There's around 60 clients in the world that own the Formula One cars that raced up to 3 years ago. So I coach these clients, I drive those cars, those Formula One cars. And then sometimes I'm also involved in the GT activities, road car activities. Whether it's the latest car I was involved with was the Ferrari Daytona, and and also the 296. I was involved in the launch and sometimes a bit in the development of the car.
Okay. I had a question. Sorry, my mind went somewhere while you were talking that is not on my list here. When you're advising a young driver, you were arguably driving in an era of Formula One, to me, which was the greatest generation of Formula One cars. You had the big engines, you had the big noise, they're smaller cars, more kind of action. How does that translate into like the newer, bigger, heavier, smaller engine car? Like, is it easy for you to translate your wisdom and your experience of that to Sainz or Leclerc?
Yeah, because I've driven also the hybrid modern cars. I haven't driven the wing cars. I haven't driven the latest ones. But the telemetry, which you at the end of the day to coach, I mean, it's very difficult to coach drivers like Leclerc or Sainz because they are the best in the world, But the way you drive a Formula One car and the way you perfection your driving is the same. Basically, you look at telemetry, same channels. You always look at the speed channel, brake, steering. There's like 6 or 7 channels that we they look now, and we used to look in my era. And then video analysis, now they do a lot more video analysis than they used to do in my time. But this is something, you get used to. And the newer generation, they do a lot of video analysis. You can really see that they were born into that time. And then the driving technique is the same. So the way you trail brake into a corner, the way you apply throttle, you use the curbs. Some of the circuits are the same, so some of them I really know them very well from when I used to race. Some are new, and I had to learn them. So the basic concepts, they really haven't changed that much. The cars are a bit heavier now, 200 kilos heavier. The lap time at the end of the day is very similar to my era, but yeah, it's quite similar. I don't have to. Basically, probably that's why a guy like Alonso, is still doing very well, because he used to be good 20 years ago, and he's still good now, because
Sure.
cars, you drive them in a similar way, a little bit different, but really not much. You don't have to. It just comes very natural.
Well, you guys are the best in the world, so it you're not like me where you would struggle to understand what's happening. Um, so that's so you also do media support with them as well. I mean, do you oftentimes find that a young 20 something needs more help? I know at 20, 22, 24, 25, I don't think I could have handled the amount of media attention and pressure that you get with that particular role. And even in your role too, but I think as I've gotten older, I've been in more of those situations. It's easier for me to just kind of think and talk at the same time and understand like what my words mean, a lot of intentionality in my words. Do you support them quite a bit with that as well?
Yeah, it's media and sponsor. They have also a lot of sponsor activities. I remember when I used to race in Formula One that this type of work, I thought it was distracting me from what was important. So I can really empathize with them. And that's why whenever I do activities with them, I try to make sure they spend the least time. They have to spend time, because at the end of the day, Formula One is financed by the sponsors, financed by the media, because the media comes to the fans, and the fans, that's what the sponsors are there. So first of all, I understand that we need them. I know that sometimes the drivers say, "Oh my God, I would rather be spending time with the engineer," and I try to balance to help them in any way I can. It hasn't changed that much. Maybe the only change now that with social media, all the fans have a phone, and everything is more immediate. But I was very busy at the time, and I can see they are very busy now. It hasn't really changed that much. Maybe the average audience now is a bit younger, which is great. That's where Formula One is doing very well now. And these young fans are more enthusiastic maybe than they used to be. In my time, they were more core fans, and now there's a lot of young fans, and that is great.
Yeah, I personally really like the Drive to Survive fan. Again, I've been a fan for a very long time. Before Drive to Survive was a thing, and I like the excitement that they have, and they're very curious, and they ask a lot of questions, and it's kind of fun to be around that. It's like a little kid. They get so excited about certain things that you're kind of like uh maybe callous to, and it's just exciting to be around that kind of excitement. So how how do you measure success in the role of an ambassador? I think you hear a lot of ambassador stories of drivers as they kind of come off of their driving career, they become ambassadors. We've seen it with Rosberg, we've heard about it with Hamilton and whatnot. How do you measure success in your role?
Yeah, for me maybe it's a bit different, because I'm so involved with Ferrari in the racing team, that for me, when we do well on the race team, I really feel great. So that's the best. That really applies to success. When you have a podium finish, or like we won in Singapore, that was probably the highlight of the year. Having said that, at the same time, I know when I've done a good job. But my job is when I do is not so dependent to the performance of the car. So I just enjoy the success of the team, and maybe only when I drive the Formula One cars, because I have a lot of responsibility then. When I drive any car of a client, first of all, I have to make sure I do a good job because it's not my car. I only have a few laps because I know every lap is very expensive for those clients, even though they may be very wealthy, but I also take care of them in a way. So when I finish an event, then I feel proud because everything went smooth, everything went well. I did my job. I didn't do any mistake. I did good coaching with these clients. That's probably where I feel more rewarded on my driving ability. On the racing weekend, the success, I know when I do a good job, but it's not such a difficult job. It's more linked to the result of the team at the end of the day. I feel the team was successful basically, and I'm part of the team.
I think that it's amazing that you get hired to go drive fast cars. I I think that that's one of the coolest career paths to have, where somebody is, reaching out to you, hiring you to go drive their car, the team's car, and whatever that event is. I honestly can't personally fathom, what that would be like personally to have, people or agents or managers calling you, or team owners calling you to come, drive their really fast car. I'm a car guy. I love cars. I love fast cars. I love the power. I love driving a car that just wants to go. And and I think that um, what I have access to is probably not even in the same ballpark of what you have access to. That just sounds like a really, really fulfilling career.
No, it is. And at my age, I know last time I drove the Formula One cars was 2 weeks ago. I was in Fiorano and I drove different Formula One cars because we were doing some shakedowns prior to the Ferrari finale in Mugello, which is the biggest event we do at the end of the year. We do a big, big event, and we have most of the clients turn up for this event. So I was shaking down the Formula One cars, just making sure they were also well set up and everything was fine. And that day, and especially when I come to Fiorano, I really feel I'm so lucky to do the job. At the end of the day, I'm doing it's my dream job. As soon as you say, they even pay you to do that. And but that's one part. Another thing is that at my age, I'm going to be 50 soon, and at my age, to still drive the Formula One cars, I know that's very, very uncommon. There's very few people in the world that at the age of 50 they still constantly drive Formula One cars. So yeah, it's a big privilege that Ferrari still trust me on that. Of course, I have more experience, so in a way, I do my job better. But yeah, I've been with Ferrari now 20 years almost, and Formula One 24, 20, and to still be doing that job now, yeah, it's great. Yes.
So and I want to link this question to that specifically. You're also a commentator for Sky Sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is one of the greatest elements of live racing that I've experienced in 20 years of watching the sport, is having a driver involved in the commentary, because it's not just so much like an awareness of like, you watch the race and you can immediately tell what happened, like a rear suspension failure or suspension failure, before I can even comprehend what's happened. You can hear it and understand, but also the strategy. Like, it's really interesting to be watching a race and have the driver commentator, talk about a strategy that should be taking place, and then like 3 or 4 seconds later, the team's calling the car in, or they're doing something to do that. And I think as a fan, like, it opens up a whole new can of worms that we have access to. It's not really the like here in the States we call it like the couch quarterback or the Monday morning quarterback, where we just go and we tear everybody's decisions apart. It's really cool because you've been in that seat, you've been on the pit wall, like you've been in with the engineers, and so you almost see the future in a race. Do you? I mean,
It
is
is.
that
It is like as you say. It's not a very difficult job because you're so knowledgeable, and I also attend the briefings before the race, so I really know everything that's going to happen. Actually, the only difficult part, which now I'm very used to, is because I work with the Formula One team, I have to be careful with what I disclose, So sometimes I feel I'm not giving interesting comments, and then people tell me, yeah, of course you give a lot of interesting comments, because I know I'm not saying everything I know. And sometimes I have to be very diplomatic because I'm linked to Ferrari. So I know that if I wouldn't be working for a Formula One team, Ferrari in that case, my TV commentary would be a little bit more open. I wouldn't say the word relaxed, but I would have to be less careful than I am now. But I've done so many years now that I know what I cannot say, and I've learned how to. Because Ferrari at the beginning they were a little bit. They were not sure if I was right that someone from the team was going to be doing TV commentary. So I think they observed me for the first year, and then they saw I was doing okay, and they let me free, free kind of. But yeah, that's the only thing that I cannot say everything, and I cannot always give exactly what I would think because I'm representing Ferrari.
It's a respect thing too. I think you probably respect the brand and the team and kind of the honor of Ferrari. I mean, it does have a pretty substantial heritage and legacy in the sport, and and I think that you respect that. You said that earlier. You're a pretty lucky guy to be there, for 20 years, and I think that it's probably pretty easy for them to trust you, and it's probably pretty easy for you not to just get out there and just tear them apart on the track for an impossible decision that they have to make in 3 seconds. And
yeah. No, it works well. It works well. And anyway, it's an asset for the Italian public, which is the ones that they listen to me, of course, to have someone that talks within Ferrari, that goes to the briefings, that talks to the drivers. Even if I may not disclose everything I know, is someone from within Ferrari. So it works great. The TV company are very happy. The fans are happy. Ferrari are happy. It works well. And I mean, if Ferrari make a mistake, I won't defend them to death. I may not be involved so much. Then it's more my colleague that goes into it saying what he. So that's how it works. When something happens, I'm a bit softer. But anyway, if there's a mistake, there's a mistake. There's not much you can say.
Yeah, look, it's obvious in that particular situation, and I imagine you respect them quite a bit. How did you get into motorsports? I mean, were you a car guy as a kid? Did you come about this just watching races with family? Did you want to do this from day one, or did it happen later in life? Like how did this all start?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone, it's very strange that someone gets into motorsport if there's no one from his surrounding that's one day introduces him to that world. In my case, it was my father. He liked cars. He never did any racing, but he had yeah, he liked cars. So we would clean it together and we could see that he was taking care of the tires, and so I think we started to appreciate his love he had for cars, and we liked it as well. Now, the first time I remember, naturally, there was something in me that it's because I think, as I say, someone from outside has to make it easy, but there must be some fire within. It was when we were playing with, we call it scalextric. It's like some little cars that they go in rails, and you have like a remote control, but the car is on a fixed layout. Mm-hmm. And I would really spend a lot of time, not only driving with the cars, but changing the tires. So I really went into it a lot. And then the next step was with the remote control cars. Mm-hmm. I would also spend so many hours and try to make them slide. And then when my father would take us wherever, holiday, wherever, we wanted him to go fast. So I could feel there was a very natural love with speed. So there was a love with cars, love with speed. Then I was a good student at school, and we are three brothers in my family. And one day my father said, "Look, any of you three get very good grades, I may buy you a go-kart. Not to go racing, just for fun on the weekends. So I was a good student, I got the good grades. He bought us the go-kart. We would go just practice for fun, the three of us, three brothers sharing the go-kart. And one day a guy spotted my older brother. Because my older brother is very talented, very, very talented guy. And he told my father, hey, your kid is great. Why don't you put him into racing? So my father, he didn't know that world. So my brother started racing, and then I wanted to follow his steps. So basically, without my father, it would have been very strange. I would have liked that world. Without my good grades, probably he wouldn't have bought us a good go-kart. And then my brother was also very important because someone spotted the talent he has.
So did you start competitively go-karting with him, or whatever happened between the two of you?
He's a bit older, so for a few years we were just enjoying weekends for fun, no racing. We didn't know there was a world of racing behind go-karts. Then when my brother started racing, I did as well, but I was always 2 years behind. So he would be racing in, I don't know, the senior category, and I would be in the junior category. So just later on, we've sometimes done karting together for fun, but we've never competed one against the other.
Where was the moment where he was just kind of like, this is fun, and you said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
When I went into racing, straight away I got so it was so I was so intense, and I was so focused. I remember I would be so nervous before. So on my first year already, the night before was hard for me to sleep because the day after I had the race. So there I saw I wanted it so badly. Now on my second year I was Spanish champion, so I could see straight away I did very well, and I wanted it really to. My dream was to be in Formula One, basically very early on. So it went from just fun to being serious. Just when I went into racing, straight away I understood that you needed to have. It was a very important thing in my life, racing world.
So what was the journey like then for you, going from Spanish karting champion to Formula One? Was it harder back then because you didn't have as much media exposure or global exposure, or did that make it easier than today?
I was very lucky. I think to reach Formula One, or you are a mega 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 talent guy like Leclerc or Hamilton, Alonso. You know that because although I was second in the European Championships, so I did also well internationally, but um, I was very good. But there were some guys who were really exceptional. When I say some guys, it's like four or five. Okay, that you have them now in Formula One. So I was very good, and I've won Le Mans, and on my best year in Formula One, I finished. My best result was fifth in 2003 in one of the Grand Prix. But I I've compared myself to Schumacher because I've been teammates with a lot of world champions. I've been teammates with Schumacher, Villeneuve, Alonso, Vettel, Raikkonen. So I know they have something that I don't have. Maybe it's 1/10, 2/10 of a second, but they have that. So I think, if you are a very, very, very talented guy like those five guys I just commented, um, probably they'll make it eventually. Someone will see they are very, very, very good. If you are just very good, like me, then you have to be a little bit lucky to really make it to Formula One. And so I was. Probably the more you work, the luckier you get. I was telling you, I'm a very hard worker. So, but I got my chance. My chance was that I won a championship called World Series. It's like Formula Two. Okay, now it doesn't exist anymore, but at the time it did exist. And the prize of winning that championship was a Formula One test. And I prepared that test so much, so much, way before I even knew I was going to win that championship. And that day I did a very good test, and I was offered the drive with Minardi at the time, which is now Alpha Tauri. But at the same time, so I was lucky for winning a championship that you had a test. But then Minardi is a team that needs finance, so they said, look, we want you very much, but we need we need a sponsor because we don't have the full budget. And then I was also lucky enough that at that time Spain had some international companies that they wanted to go into different markets. In that case was Telefonica, which is the telephone company in Spain, and they were willing to go into Formula One. So all the stars were aligned. I went in Formula One when Telefonica wanted to expand, and it all worked very well. So I think you need a bit of luck, but you can make your own luck in a way.
Okay, so good point. And I want to talk about this. You get the opportunity to go test a Minardi. For your general common fan, you jump out there like today, you jump out there in FP1, you run some laps, and then the other drivers hop in the car and the weekend moves on. What is it about that test for you, or like what in that test got you a seat in Formula One? Was it lap times comparative to the drivers that were in the car? Did you actually have the opportunity to go to, another track and spend a day testing versus an hour? What are you hoping to accomplish as a driver back then?
Yeah, we have, because it was like a shootout. It was me against the Formula 3 German champion, against the Formula 3 Italian champion. There were like four guys, and the reference guy was the Formula 1 driver from the previous year. So the actual race driver. No, sorry, the test driver was the reference for us. So we all had 20 laps. And I exceeded expectations of the team. I did so well that they told me, look, stay, and we want to give you another test the day after, because we've been very impressed, and we want to see if what you just did was just like a one-off, or you can repeat it the day after, And they didn't give the chance to the other guy. So basically, I was already, after day one, I could see I did something outstanding for Minardi. And they were referenced because I did also very well comparing to the test drive at Minardi. Although the test drive at Minardi didn't drive that much anyway, but he was a much more experienced guy than me. I stayed the second day. I also did very well on the second day. And that's when they said, look, we were not supposed to propose you that, but we want to propose your race team. So that's why I think in life, sometimes you get given like a chance and you just have to make the most of it. And I really made the most of it, because without having done great in those 20 laps, which was basically fast, I was fast. My feedback was very good, what I was telling them about what the car was doing, and then making no mistakes. So I think the first time you drive a Formula One car, you need to be good in these three things. If you, on the first time you drive an F1 car, you have an accident, which can happen, very unlikely they're going to give you a second chance. If you're not fast, very unlikely. If you're not professional in your approach, they may not like that, because it's very competitive. There's a lot of good guys there, and I really tick the three boxes, And that's when they said, okay, let's move on to racing next year if you can find the sponsor. Then I had the sponsor for 2 years. Then I did also very well with Minardi, and then Williams signed me without a sponsor, So that's probably when I really was just signed fully for it didn't matter if I had a backing or not from my country. I didn't have any backing then, and Frank Williams signed me with Williams as a test driver. I did some races. So I say I was lucky, because without Telefonica, probably very unlikely Minardi would have signed me.
How when you're racing for Minardi, you have the support. This is the necessary thing in all motorsports. And then Williams comes calling and they want you, not your money. How is that process? I mean, is it you and a bunch of other people that they're talking to and wherever they feel the most synergy, or is it like, we want Marc, we want him in this seat, and what's it going to take to make it happen? Like, how does this all start?
Yeah, no, they pick. In that case, when it's a top team like Williams, at that time Williams was fighting for championships. I remember Frank Williams and Patrick Head both. They just said, "We know you are available," because they heard I was available. They did a lot of research already. So when I went to the first meeting with them, they already had made up their mind. They wanted me. They just wanted to meet me and just make sure we agreed, But and it was a very similar thing with Ferrari. When then I went to Ferrari, uh, I proposed to them because I could see the Williams journey just had finished, so I was available. And I at that time, there were even faxes. Wouldn't send emails, so I sent a fax to Jan Todt. He was the team principal at the time, or my manager did. I really haven't had managers, but for a couple of years I had, and he did that. And the same thing, I went to the meeting, but they already said, "Look, we want you." And I think they were used to Williams or Ferrari when they pick someone, for sure that guy was going to go to them. So um, yeah, it was very straightforward. I mean, in fact, even with Ferrari, for example, I drove the car before I signed the contract. So they said, "Okay, we want you. We need you to test the car," which was great because I tested the 2004, which is probably one of the best F1s ever built in the history. And it was in such short notice that I had to put the overall of Schumacher. They just tapped like his name, or taped the name, and I drove the car without a contract. So that day, that's when I went to the track and I could see they were waiting for me to test the car in Barcelona. I was 100% sure that the contract was signed, because at that time I didn't have time to sign the contract. If you drive the car, of course, then it means, for them it's a done deal.
What was it like going from a Williams to the F2004? I mean, I love the story of that car, but what was the drivability of that car like relative to the Williams?
Yeah, I mean, we because at that year Williams finished second, Ferrari finished first. Okay, the 2004 is one of the most dominant F1s ever. Now the engine of the BMW engine from Williams was very powerful, so the Ferrari was not any more powerful. They were very similar on power. The grip, the downforce, also Williams was in a very good level. Where Ferrari exceeded, and I told them, Ferrari, and I think that's why they won the championship that year. They had two things. First was efficiency. The car had very low drag, and that's very important even nowadays. It's basically top speed and or high speed in high speed tracks. And then Ferrari was also very good in the electronics, very refined electronics. When I talk about electronics, I mean traction control, electronic diff, this part, because nowadays you can do less because you have an official supplier and then you can adapt to it. But at that time, you did all your own software. We had Magnetic Minardi as our partner, and Ferrari had a different level of electronic sophistication comparing to Williams. And I think those two elements, that's what made Ferrari win the championship.
Do you feel that difference in the car as a driver? I mean, do you get in it, take it out on the track, and you're like, wow, I can feel this is a different car?
Yeah, you feel the smoothness of the traction control. When they do the briefing to you and they tell you about the steering wheel, the functions you can do, I could see that you could do many more functions than with Williams, and that's something where Schumacher, I think, he was a big part of it. He really was very good at telling the engineers what he wanted from the car, so you could perfection the car more. And if you had someone like Schumacher, which he would spend so many hours with the engineers, working with them, he really made the most of all these functions. So yeah, the first time I drove the car and the way the traction control and the way the differential would help the balance of the car, I could see it was. I mean, we're talking probably about like a tenth of a second or 2/10 of a second, but that's a different probably from winning or not winning. Yes.
Yes, it is. So you were a test driver in an era where that was a critical role that has been heavily restricted today. How do you feel like that's affected the sport in general? Like, does it make it more competitive, or does it provide a better platform for driver development? Or
Yeah, okay. At that time, testing was unlimited. So you could test as much as you wanted. There were test teams. We had even two test teams at Ferrari. I was more in charge of the tire development testing. And at Ferrari, we had a big advantage with even up now, because we own two racetracks. We are the only team that owns racetracks. We had the owners of Mugello and the owners of Fiorano. So we had a lot of flexibility, which we agreed for the good of the sport to reduce testing up to 3 days now, which is incredible that you only have 3 days of testing. And now we do all the development with the simulator, which I was involved heavily at the beginning because we had no simulator. We had something at Williams. So for 4 years, I spent a lot of time at Ferrari developing the simulator from zero. So for sure, I think it would be better if we could test, but I understand that the cost comparing to the return doesn't really make much sense. You go testing, no one watches you, there's no TV, it's just a big cost. And nowadays with the budget cap, it makes sense to reduce testing so much. The new drivers, however, they have been born with simulators. So for them, they don't miss it as much. And at the same time, in my era, there were 16 Grand Prix, now there's 24. So obviously, if you increase the amount of Grand Prix, you have to reduce the amount of testing. So I think it's the way the world has been going. You have a budget cut, you have to reduce something. Testing is probably the first thing you want to reduce. More Grand Prix, you have to reduce testing because otherwise drivers cannot cope with everything. And then the world of simulation is very efficient. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's 90% the same thing. So, and the new drivers, as I say, they don't even know that in my era you would do like 100 days of testing a year, Now they do 1.5. That's how much testing they do, 1.5 days, and they go into racing, and they are used to it, so they don't miss it.
So okay, so you've been a driver with 100 days of testing and then simulation. Do you feel like you can keep up with the development program throughout the season in a simulator as well as you can by getting in the car and driving it around the track all day?
No, you cannot do it, and that's why sometimes this year, for example, few teams they brought developments that they didn't work, and they had to then get back and use free practice one to test things. Even to extend this year that they've been doing testing in racing. If you would be allowed to test, those issues would not happen. You would go to the race 100% sure that the parts you are bringing, they are going to be working. So yeah, it's not the same. Sometimes you have to be brave nowadays. Say, okay, do we bring it? Do we don't bring it? Do we bring it? We don't bring it to a sprint weekend because if you get it wrong, one session only, then you go into qualifying. So yeah, it's more difficult nowadays to develop cars. Nowadays, it's a lot more difficult.
That is so interesting to me. I have a lot of engineers, and we talk about the process of getting from a CAD design to the wind tunnel, and then getting it overnighted to the track and whatnot. And me in my world, it would make more sense to throw it on a card, take it around Fiorano a couple of times, make sure that the efficiencies exist, and then send it to the track. I can't imagine having to theorize it on a computer in a wind tunnel and then send it to the Grand Prix with 20 million people watching and hopefully it works. That is.
Yeah. It's not that it doesn't seem right, but the engineers and the simulation models are so advanced.
Yeah.
In my era, there were 20 cars as well, like now, sometimes 22. And I finished many times with the Minardi, finished 8th. I had a lot of 8 finishes. But why? Because 12 cars finished the race. Because 8 broke down. Now, at the most, 2 cars break down, So the reliability of the cars nowadays is much higher, although there's a lot less testing. And that's just because the simulation models are just so advanced. And the 4 rig post and the whole technology has advanced a lot. Having said that, it sounds wrong that teams bring updates that they don't work on the race weekend. They have to get back, try it on a race. It's just not quite right, And I think we've gone to another extreme. 3 days of testing for the whole season is kind of ridiculous, Maybe 100 days was too much, but 3 days is probably also too little. But there's so many racing nowadays, so many races that there's just no time, So I understand that And it works fine. The fans are happy, and just that the engineers sometimes they have to think twice whether to bring an update or not.
I've on like a total pivot of conversation. So we've always had a lot of guests from IndyCar on the show, and we kind of, one of our guests was really close to Dallara, and Dallara came on the show, and we got really close, and gotten to spend a lot of time with them, and then several guests, Stefan Johansson, that I've had on the show, have this huge emphasis in LMP1, IMSA, endurance racing. And, I've always been interested in it, but not like open wheel single seaters. And the more and more and more I talk to these guests and then watch how drivers pivot from, open wheel or IndyCar to endurance racing, I'm getting this fascination, so much so that I'm going to go to the 24 Hours of Daytona this year to check it out, because I keep hearing so many great things about this type of racing. I know nothing about it except what the car looks like and a couple of people that have raced in it or that are around the sport. Is it a natural gravitation for drivers to go to that? Like, what is it about that type of racing that I guess gets your attention?
First, the car. When I race in LMP1, which is now the hypercar, I've also driven the Ferrari hypercar a few weeks ago, and you drive it the same way as the Formula One car. So for Formula One drivers to go to hypercar or LMP1 or LMDH, now there's the two classes. It comes very natural. You don't have to adapt your driving style. However, if you go to GT, that becomes a lot more difficult. You do not enjoy it as much. I've done both, and in the GT I didn't enjoy it because the car rolls, the car is very heavy, it doesn't have downforce. At least to me, I didn't really enjoy it. So I've always liked to go into the LMP1 class because I just drove the car, enjoyed it, and I was competitive straight away. Now to get into the more endurance mentality, which means sharing the car with other drivers, that this is something that it takes a bit of time to not to know how it works, because of course we all know how it works. But Formula One drivers are very selfish. Your teammate is your first competitor, and the more you have to change that because the car wins, and for the car to win, the three drivers have to do the best job possible. So if you can share something with them, do it, because more chance of the car winning. And then you have to take care of the car. Maybe you're better off losing 1/10 per lap, but not abusing the curbs because the car has to make it to the end. So this mentality, not all drivers have it. Normally, the younger drivers have it less, normally. But it's a bit more down to personality. But I did fall in love with this type of endurance racing. It was great. The cars look great. I think they are just so attractive on how they look. They're just so much fun to drive. And then I really got into this teamwork effort of Le Mans. And I was very lucky that Ferrari at that time allowed me to race with other manufacturers, because I raced with Audi, I raced with Peugeot, I raced with Nissan whilst I was at Ferrari, and I had a great time.
I'm still trying to figure out how I experience that as a fan. You go to an IndyCar race, you got 2.5 hours. Go to a Formula One, 2.5 hours. Going to a 24-hour race, I'm trying to figure out: do I leave? Do I sleep at the track? Do I get a tent? What do I do? How do I experience this event? And luckily, I think Dallara will help me with some of that. But I'm actually really excited to go, and my 14-year-old daughter is going to come with me because she has really become fascinated with racing and wants to work in Formula One as a hospitality or a performance coach or something. And she just loves being around fast cars. So I've got that going for me.
Yeah, probably I would say you get out, get disconnect, go back in. You don't have to be 24 hours. Even when I was racing, I would try to go to sleep,
Yeah.
and for a couple of hours, I would never felt deep sleep because I've almost always been fighting for wins. and there's the big speaker, and I had the radio of the team, but it's nice even to disconnect for an hour, go back and see what has changed, But of course, that's something that makes it less attractive on TV because, as you say, it's so long, it's impossible. No one's going to be there 24 hours watching in front of the TV. But it's nice, you go out, you go to the hotel, you keep checking how the race is going. You go to sleep even for a few hours, then you wake up and see what's changed. That you're gonna get into. That's nice as well. It's completely different to Formula One.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So we'll check it out. And then a couple of guests I've had on from Formula One tell me the 24-hour Le Mans is a must go. So that is on the bucket list now too. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I have more and more places to go and things to watch and spend my money on.
Great.
What in your career, what's been your pinch me moment? I mean, you've got a lot in your experience. Like, what do you consider a pinch me moment in all of that time?
So the most emotional, to the point that I even cried from joy, was winning Le Mans, because I was lucky also enough that I did the last stint, which that's very exciting, because and I won with a French manufacturer. It's a French race. Peugeot didn't win that race for many, many, many years. We were coming from a dominant era of Audi wins, so we managed to break that. And it was a very intense race. We were fighting with our sister car, so it was very intense. So that was the highlight from joy, basically. From proud, the first time I joined Ferrari, the day I put the Ferrari overall and I look into the mirror, into the motorhome, and I walked into the garage and I could see all the Ferrari mechanics, and I had the 2004 car. That day I realized I reached something that I never even dreamt of one day reaching. And then the other moment that was very important to me was the first time I got into the point. And at that time, the points in Formula One were only top 6. Now there's 10 cars, so it was very difficult. And I finished in the top 6 with Minardi, which was something that happened every 30 years. And yeah, that I really enjoyed, because I was fighting with Hakkinen, with Irvine, because it was like a crazy race. And those 3 moments are from the racing. Then I can admit, you'll never forget the first time you drive an F1 car. This is the fastest car you're gonna ever drive. So the first laps I did with a Formula One car, I still really have them. I remember very, very well.
Okay. When you do that, when you get in a Formula One car for the first time, take it out on track, you hit your hot lap. I mean, are you screaming inside of your helmet? Are you calm? Or are you just so focused that you don't even remember that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I had only 20 laps, so I had to do very well straight away, which is not bad, because that way you're more focused. But I remember I got out of the pits, I accelerated for the first time, and my feeling was, God, this is fast. The acceleration, this is the first thing that you really feel on your body. It's like I had that feeling like you go into the time tunnel, that you start to accelerate, and everything happens just so fast, like you're into a movie, kind of, a movie that you increase the speed of the movie. And then the first laps are the ones that they are most shocking. The braking is just so heavy. There's nothing in the world, I think, that brakes with so much G-force like a Formula One car, and then the cornering as well. So it's something you feel on your body, and then also visually you can see something. Then you get used to it. But the first time is like, wow, that would be that would be the word you would be saying. More than smiling during the lap, I think it's just, wow, this is just so fast and so much that I'm feeling on my body. It's cool. It's like I've been working on for it for 20 years, and it's even beyond what I was imagining that it was gonna be.
I always find that fascinating to hear that part of it, because I remember George Russell saying the first time that he got in a Formula One car for a test that he had like blown capillaries in his eyes or something, and his neck and his head hurt so bad that he couldn't even do anything at the end of the day because there was so much just G-force on him that he wasn't even expecting, and his body hadn't adapted to. I think that's an incredible experience. I've been in very, very fast road cars, and I've not had that experience getting out of it. So I think if I could ever find a time to get in a two-seater F1 car, I would jump at that opportunity just to feel it and then be done.
Hmm.
What did you not expect once you got into this world? What surprised you?
Yeah, probably I was surprised. I had so much respect, or all the Formula One drivers that I would watch on TV. For me, they were unattainable. I had really idealized them a lot, and I remember first Grand Prix was in Australia, and I went because we are all nervous. I was nervous as well, even more the first Grand Prix. So when you are nervous, you go to the toilet, because any little bit of pee and you go to the toilet. So I remember I go to the toilet just before the race, 15 minutes. So we did the formation lap, and then you have like 10, 15 minutes before you go for the start. And I remember, I think it was Hakkinen or Villeneuve. Someone was there as well. So I look at him as like he's a human being. So I think the first thing that surprises you is that you Formula One is seen as something unattainable, so far out of reach. And then when you go into the world, you realize they are all human beings. Yes, best drivers, best engineers, but human beings at the end of the day, like that have similar problems, similar doubts, and but still now, yet because of TV, because of social media, I think we see it far, and it's regular people, very good at it, but just regular people. And I was a bit impressed by this because I really thought they were, I wouldn't say from a different planet, but I really thought they were a bit, out of reach.
In this career, this is probably a dumb way to ask this question, but have you ever had a moment of adversity or like a massive learning experience that kind of translated into the rest of your life? I think we all have those moments in life, but what is an experience that you've had in motorsports that was a huge education moment for you, or just a moment of overcoming impossible adversity?
Yeah, I've had two very big accidents in Le Mans, big ones. Well, one in Le Mans and one was testing for Le Mans. That then you realize, okay, I managed to get back, but it took me like a couple of years. In one of them, in the Porsche curves, which are the fastest section of Le Mans, and it took me 2 years to overcome that. So for 2 years, when I was going through that turn, in my mind, something was telling me lift a little bit, because it's a very fast turn that you do it almost flat, not quite. So it took me so long to overcome that. Then eventually I did, and funny enough, after the accident, I won the race. So that's how much it can take out and then give back. But basically, this thing that happened to me, I went from one of the most difficult moments of my life, I would say, because I really thought that was the end, to the year after winning that race. Shows that, and that's it's like this in life in general, that you learn more from the difficult moments. You don't learn so much from winning.
Mm-hmm.
Winning is great, but you don't learn from that. So every time now that I go through a very difficult moment, I know that if I persevere, at the end, on the other side of that door, there is a reward as big as the difficulty you are facing. And that has always been like that in my life. And that's something that sports shows, but it applies to normal life. And for me, the example was Le Mans. I thought I was gonna die. It's the only time I felt that in my life, in that accident. And the year after, I was crying from joy, which I've never cried from joy, on the same track. in
Yeah.
just 1 year lifespan. It's incredible.
I I I've never been much of a sports guy in my life. Like I enjoy competition. I enjoy watching, American sports here. I've kind of gravitated to, a lot of F1 and football as an adult. And starting this show, there's so many synergies that you all experience that translate to the rest of, I guess, the rest of us in the real world of, you know, hard work, um, a little bit of luck, a lot of focus, overcoming adversity and like really chasing impossible stuff, to be one of 20 or 30 drivers in the world, at any given time that is capable of driving these types of cars is a massive rarity. I don't know what the actual number is relative to the global population, but it's probably a really small number. And you guys have stories that are so relatable to me in my world, in the business world. And, and I know people that have been on the show, and, I get messages all the time of like, hey, I heard this guest and, they just said something that was so impactful in my life. And, and they share it. I forward it to all the guests when that happens, but it's just really, really cool how you can take something like Formula One or whatever that's so far away from your world and relate to it like you're experiencing that too. Like I can take your stories and then bring that out to my company this afternoon. And I think that's what I've really come to appreciate in motorsport is because you guys all like perform at the highest levels. It's so competitive. There's so much pressure. And like you're also navigating a very politically charged world of motorsport. Like, so you have all these things that people are like, athletes are athletes. Like if you're just physically fit or whatever, or you give a little bit of luck, you can thrive in this. And I always object to that because, not only are you one of a very, very small number of people globally that are capable of doing this and competing and surviving, you also have all of the moving parts within the sport that you have to navigate through and survive through because there are alliances and there is diplomacy that's required and relationships and opportunities and a lot of luck. And it's really, really cool to watch that and hear those stories. And honestly, like just the blend of Ferrari and Shell, I work in oil and gas as my day job. And so like when I get an opportunity to be around people that are in both of my worlds, my motorsports world and my oil and gas world, like Ferrari and Shell, I get really excited to have that. We had Valeria on the show a couple of months ago and, talking about the 70-year historical partnership of Shell and Ferrari. I know that's kind of where you come from. What what is that like? Like you were a tire tester for a Ferrari. Are you now kind of advising the fuel side of it as well?
I did in my time. I did some even not fuel development, but sometimes I tested a new fuel formulation or new oil that was supposed to give some performance, and to feel that on the car was great. It was, and you could feel it, especially. I mean, in the video you have on your background is Monza, and Monza, of course, is the most demanding track of the whole calendar for the engine.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember once that I did test a new formulation in Monza, and I did feel it, on the top end RPM, there was a little bit more extra power. Whether it was 5 horsepower, that's how much horsepower you could gain, 5, 10 horsepower on one formulation, which is a huge amount. So, I mean, now not anymore, because now all the new fuels and lubricants, they are tested first in the dynos that Shell have, and then they give it to our dynos. We test them in the dynos, and that's probably one of the areas that if the dyno says there's more power, there'll be more lap time on the racetrack. The difficulty I was telling you before, it's more down to downforce, that sometimes the wind tunnels can give a wrong reading. But the dynos on power is a, you can translate it from the dyno to the truck. So whenever Shell gives us some new formulation, we think like, okay, great, because if they did find it, we're gonna find it, and the truck is gonna find it eventually. But in my time of testing, yeah, sometimes I did do the test myself, and it was very good. It was a great feeling to feel more power just because of different fuel or a newer fuel or newer oil.
I love the innovation in the sport too. I love it. We're so bound by time. I always wrap up a good interview with, what advice do you have for young people? I believe that young people view this world as Hollywood. You know, you jump in a car, you move to an area, and you hope you're discovered. You know, and it's this big intimidating machine that, you know, it's very, very difficult to get in any aspect. I think, you know, even an engineer feels it impossible to be an engineer for Ferrari, you know, or for Shell. What advice do you have for young people entering this world?
Yeah, two things. First, that it's studying is very important. So, and studying is important. So, if you go into sport, for example, don't give up on studying, because studying is going to help you be a better sportsman, because you'll have a better understanding on how this world works. You're going to be more prepared. You have more tools. You know, you have a better structure in your head how to prepare. And most of the sports, Formula One in particular, is a very complex sport. So the more clever, the more intelligent you are, the more prepared you are from your studies, they're really going to help you perform better as a driver. So try to always, in parallel, even if that means that sometimes it may take 2 years to do 1 year of school or even university, but don't give up. There's no excuse. You will always be able to find the time to study whilst you compete in whichever sport you do. And then the second one is that even Ferrari, which you would think a bit similar to what happened to me when I went to Australia and I was on a similar level to, I saw my name at the same page as Hakkinen, Schumacher, Coulthard, you know. If you want to be one day an engineer, mechanic, wherever, you know, believe me that the guys who are engineers and mechanics are just normal people with normal background, most of. Like the engineer of Charles Leclerc, for example, I'm very good friends with, and he is, because he lives nearby, and he went to normal school from a normal family, but he studied engineering in a normal university, not the top university in England, you know, Spanish university, but he just was very passionate. He worked very hard, and he's now the Ferrari engineer of Charles Leclerc. You know, when you hear the voice, it's his voice. You know, and he went to NASCAR, and then eventually Ferrari signed him. You know, so there's not really many boundaries. There's not many limitations to what you want to do in life. Even I don't know, working for Formula One and Ferrari, which would be of the most iconic sports and brands, you know. And believe me, this guy, I know his background, and he comes from a completely normal background. He just persevered his dream, and he managed to make it happen, you know. So basically, we have more control of not all of it, you know. Of course, there's a part of it that it doesn't depend on us, but we have a much more control than we think, as long as we apply proper values and 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 we do the right thing, which you just said before. We all know what we have to do right to be successful in life. It's a big part of it is down to us. Yes.
I I couldn't agree more. I frankly, I think that's wise advice for anything. And I do second that. Formula One, IndyCar, it is full of very normal people that are down to earth, and it's very accessible when, you know, first off, when you respect it and appreciate it. And, you know, this whole podcast started off from a couple of emails, you know, and it just really, it took off. And, you know, it has started a lot of things. And I'm not, motorsports educated. I am not a race car driver. I'm not a race engineer. I'm a tech startup guy. And it's just sent a couple of emails out, cultivated some relationships. They translated, and I have a WhatsApp channel with all the guests I've had on the show, and we just talk. They're very normal people. They'll see something on social media. Hey, Ryan, what's going on with that? Or, hey, tell your daughter congratulations on something. It's really, really cool how open the sport is when you kind of have this like-minded passion for motorsports. So, Marc, thank you for coming on the show, man. I know we went just a smidge over here, and you have great stories. You are always welcome on the show. Anytime that you want to come on, I'm an email away, a WhatsApp message away. If I can catch you at any event, man, I'd love to shake your hand and say hi. And you're always welcome, and I'm really, really grateful for your time. You have an amazing story.
Thank you. You're welcome. Congratulations on the program, Ryan.